hello there. It's about to get real. Because now we're talking about Avengers Endgame spoilers.
Spoilers. Stop now if you don't want to know
Right,
things.
we're going to spoil the whole movie.
You've been warned, right? So you've got a couple seconds to, do whatever you got to do.
Click and
Right,
close
if you've
the
been
tab,
watching this
whatever.
guide to help you.
It's funny, you mentioned that at the press screenings that people were like cheering and laughing and crying.
Sobbing.
I went to the premiere
God.
where the Russo brothers cameo got applause. I didn't even know who they were.
Wait, where are the Russos
So
in this?
one of them is the guy who went on the date
Yes, in the support group.
in the support group, the guy who went on the date.
So this is the
that's
thing
why
that,
people were laughing
the
at
thing that
that.
made me gasp in this movie is that, we pick up pretty soon after the events of the first film. Captain Marvel rescues Tony Stark and Nebula, brings them back to Earth. They try to, they figure out where Thanos is. They're gonna get the stones back. They can't. It's fucked. Thor kills Thanos anyway, and then 5 years later, I was like, whoa!
They do it so slowly. They put 5. And you don't know, are they going to say days, weeks?
Right.
Years later. I gasped when Hawkeye goes to, get hot dogs for
Yeah.
his kids or whatever, and
they're
then
gone.
one by one.
Right.
Well,
So
I went,
what I was going to bring up though is the thing about the scene with the support group where the guy talks about going on the
Right.
date. I was a big fan of The Leftovers.
yeah.
So between the disappearing kids and that support group, I was like, ooh, this is like The Leftovers.
Right. So, but did you notice? Correct me if I'm wrong. The date that he's talking about, he was on a date with a dude, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Right.
Which is
That was
apparently
cool.
the first. I saw an actual article about this on Deadline today. It's the first gay character in a Marvel superhero
it
movie.
only took 22 movies to get one.
I guess we'll take
Isn't
it.
Captain Marvel a lesbian?
Well,
Isn't she gay?
so they
Not in the
Or
screen.
Valkyrie.
canon.
Isn't Valkyrie gay?
Not on screen yet.
Oh, I
So there has been talk that, and Tessa Thompson has said she played it that way, and there's hints that
One of the Eternals.
there's hints that Valkyrie's was in love with the other Valkyrie that got killed, and that's part of why she's so
embittered.
embittered.
Well, she and Brie Larson, Tessa Thompson and Brie Larson have a really cool Twitter
Yeah.
flirtation going with each other, which suggests that they want to all make that happen. So
Well, and they are promising a gay Eternal, so we'll see what that. how that
okay.
happens.
So big takeaways. The people who die, the whole scene with Black Widow and Hawkeye, I found very moving.
Yeah, they both want to sacrifice themselves to get the Soul Stone. She eventually does, and which means that her movie is a prequel, or she's coming back.
I was wondering that too. I was saying it to Nick in the car. I'm like, wait, is there not going to be a Black Widow movie now? But I guess it's a prequel, right?
Okay,
If she's dead.
One of the things that really irritates me about this movie is that and we talked about this a little bit before, great work on the relationship between Rogers and Stark, Captain America,
Yes,
and
that's
see
the emotional core of the
that's
film.
the emotional core. You get some of that with Thor dealing with his devastation and being the guy, like in his mind, being the guy who blew it. Turning him into the Lebowski is
I love that.
that's cute for a while, but
No.
they keep overplaying it.
They even give him like a sweater, like a shitty 70s
cardigan,
sweater.
But like a
I wish
couple
the
things,
fake
like
beer gut had been
one of the
rolled
things
out.
that
Yeah.
so one of the frustrations with the Avengers is they spent all of this really interesting time setting up this possible romance between Natasha and Bruce.
Oh,
and,
right.
And in Infinity War, they completely abandon it, right? And so then by the time we get to Endgame, like there's no talk of that at all. Like that's completely gone. And so, like, I feel like
they present her as being really like, kind of devoted to work now and feeling fucked up with the whole
And
thing.
guess,
after
but
she
like-
dies, he says he misses her.
But there was some. I got the sense.
okay,
that
sure. Now he does.
They were at
But
least
the thing,
popping
like,
off some PTSD there, and like I don't
Yeah.
have time for a relationship. I'm just living in the office and trying to like quell what
I just felt
can,
like
you know.
there's been these interesting pieces with her, even in Winter Soldier, and kind of like her relationship with Rogers. Like I feel like of all of the Avengers, Black Widow really gets short shrift here, and she's really like she's the easiest one to sacrifice because she's got no attachments, and like that kind of sucks.
But she also kept things running though. She ran the Avengers headquarters.
She
right?
did, but you don't. But I don't feel like you really ever get to know her and really get to see what makes her tick all that much, and that's frustrating. And then when we see like, oh, okay, Bruce is the smart Hulk now. Yes. Like, where the fuck did that come from, right? Like, how did we not get a whole movie of him working that out?
Well, it's
that's 5 years later.
I know, but still, like,
technology.
Like, oh, he just shows up.
We've learned we don't want a Hulk movie. I think we've pretty much
no, but look, like, okay, first of all, the mismatched buddy film of Bruce and Hulk having to make peace with each other could be hilarious, right? Sure. But like he just shows up and he's all cool. Like you don't get any like that's completely unearned. I felt like
drink
exactly.
It has no gravitas.
That really bothered me. Like you see, you know, after Hawkeye has turned into Ronin, right? Like. You don't really see much out of his character either. Like, okay, well, he's just killing people now, and then it like he kind of just turns it off.
Yeah,
right? Like,
that is sort
like,
of rushed through.
Dude has lost his whole family, so I get, but you don't get any emotional moments as to like, look, I'm doing this, I'm punishing people because I like that's the only way I can work through my pain. Whatever it is, whatever's causing him to go out and murder criminals, whatever is making that happen for him. That never gets touched on, and then when he gets back together with Natasha to go on their portion of the fetch quest, he's like, yeah, okay, and then he's kind of like,
well, I think it informs the sacrifice part in terms of him thinking that if his family comes back, he no longer deserves to be with them.
Right.
And maybe I'm reading too much into it. But that was my takeaway.
I agree with that, but it's like that's the plot outline. That's not actually any characterization, right?
No,
and that's what really that's one of the things that frustrated me. And I get it. It's 3 hours already, but there's a lot of that it's just like we've gotten to know these characters and we're really only focused on a couple of them. The other, my other frustration here is that like you get all these great scenes with Iron Man as a dad. Right. And what I really expected is him to come in and say, oh, no, we're not going to risk this at all, because there's a very real risk of everything.
He does say that.
Scene. Yeah, but
on the front porch. And he says you can stay for dinner if you don't talk shop.
Right. But then it's like once he has the dream and he figures out what they're doing wrong, he's all in. And it's, like.
I think because part of what makes Tony Stark is the love of solving the problem and figuring out the gizmo and doing the doodad. And he's very clear when it happens, like, look, bring back the people who got snapped away 5 years ago, but don't change anything else. Like he like that's always on his mind. That's always a thing for him.
You can't bet on sports, he says.
Right, but then he doesn't. But he only says that. He doesn't do anything. Like you would think a guy like Tony Stark, after. For instance, for all of the argument that happens at the beginning of the movie, like I was going to put a suit of armor around the world, right? And you didn't do it my way. You would think that he would do more to keep that from happening. And it's just like, well, I'll take your word for it, guys.
Did you guys, if I'm going to take a quick little tangent here, did you guys in any way interpret suit of armor around the world to be like a metaphor for the wall?
No.
Okay,
no.
Cool. Let's move on.
Not at all.
Let's talk about things we like, because I could go on to like time travel conundrums.
Well, so that's the other thing.
All the live long day.
But I have to complain about that too. Real quick. Like they make a big point of saying, look, you can't go back in time and kill Thanos. You can't go back in time and change things. And then they start changing things left and right. And not the least of which is that Thanos comes forward in time and they kill him. Like, what the fuck?
But so that's okay.
It's not okay.
Because it's 5 years later.
It's not okay because that
5 years after he'd already been killed once.
But it's not okay because because that means Thanos 5 years ago doesn't make everything happen.
No, yeah, believe me, that's a rabbit hole you do not want to go down.
Right.
How does Nebula kill herself in the past and not immediately die?
I wonder
How does
that too.
Steve Rogers completely rewrite the history of the 20th century and not change everything? Yeah, we have to just sort of like, okay, fine.
Well, because the payoff is that what happened to him is totally lovely.
I get it.
And that's the thing that got you choked up, isn't it?
But
no, it's not actually.
Oh, okay.
It's Spider-Man and Iron Man reuniting.
Mr.
That
Stark.
But look, I got to go back to the time travel
almost made me
thing.
cry.
I would have less problems with the holes in the time travel stuff if they didn't make such a big deal of Bruce Banner saying, "Look, here's the
Establishing
rules."
rules, yeah.
Like, don't make the rules. Like,
Yeah.
don't give me the rules and then
Do a free-for-all.
Do a free-for-all and have somebody like, all you need. I mean, look, as much as I'm complaining about throwaway lines, have Strange come up at the end with the time stone and saying, yeah, you know what, the time stone makes this all work. I can't understand it. Nobody understands it, but it's all going to work out. Basically pull the comics, everybody. That would have been fine.
Well, Tilda tries to have that conversation with Bruce Banner, right? About the whole thing where you got all the stones and you have your branch go off this way and that messes it all up.
But then he says
But that's why Steve goes back and gives all the
But
stuff.
that's the thing is then they
Yeah.
double down on following the rules. Like Bruce is like, no, we'll bring the stone back and it'll all work out. We won't change anything.
If they steal the Tesseract in 1970, then do the events of the Avengers even happen now?
No, because he brings it back, right? Because he
guess,
brings it back, but then Loki disappears with it.
But then, which timeline do we
Right.
follow? The new one where Loki disappears,
Right.
or the old one where they capture?
Right,
Yeah,
like
anyway, that's a migraine.
that's my big frustration with the movie is that you get great emotional moments for some characters, and the emotional moments you do get are in many cases at the expense of logic at all.
Let me ask you this. Does it matter if it's not logical? Does
Yeah.
it matter if it's just if it's just time heist of a movie and you see everyone you want to see and you have a good time and you laugh and you cry? Does it matter if all the little threads don't tie up in a way that makes actual sense?
It doesn't matter. It matters because they said it matters.
Okay, because they've gone to pains to explain it.
If you spend the whole movie saying, or if you have one character who is one of your smarter characters allegedly, Bruce Banner, saying, look, don't press that button. Don't press that button. Don't press that button. I'm telling you guys, don't press that button. Don't press that button. Did you hear me? Don't press that button. Is everybody on board? Don't press that button. And then somebody presses the button, and the whole movie's like, eh.
I think it's because shit gets real and they have to improvise on the fly.
I think also any time travel story does not completely hold up. Like I remember picking holes in the first Terminator. And at some point you just be like, okay, fine, we'll just this is the story.
Primer makes sense.
Primer needs a chart, but it makes sense. Yes, I suppose so.
Anyway.
I loved the moment in the big battle where I think Spider-Man or somebody is briefly fell and Captain Marvel steps up, and Valkyrie, and Pepper,
that was rad,
and it was like woman. I was like,
yeah, that was fine because it's all about the men ordinarily, so they finally get their due.
And the rest of this fucking movie is about the men. I mean, you're right. But I think Black Widow gets a very short script as far as character stuff, and it is so much the Tony and Steve show. And again, they still haven't, Captain Marvel finally this year was our headlining woman movie. So it was nice to have at least this moment of acknowledging, look at this deep bench of kick-ass women here, Shuri and the Wasp and just
Okoye.
It was just it was just nice to have them all gather up like that.
I feel like we wouldn't have any movie after the first half-hour mark if it weren't for Captain Marvel, because she fucking comes in and grabs the ship and flies it back to the Avengers headquarters.
Oh, she
right?
saves
she saves
the
the
day.
day.
She's the big gun.
Sure.
So
absolutely.
I think she gets her due for that. Do you know?
No, absolutely. See her take on Thanos is great. I'm just saying that generally speaking, this movie is a sausage fest.
No, I mean, look, there's a moment where arguably Thanos cheats, but she's got Thanos on the ropes big time, right? And that's awesome, right? And one of the things that I liked about the big battle scene is it's not you can kind of keep track of it, and you get to see everybody's specialty and how it works, and then the way they play off each other was really good, right? After, and we'll get to this in a moment, what to me, the moment that I cheered is Cap with the hammer.
Oh yeah.
But
let's talk about that. Yeah.
When he's on the run with the gauntlet, and you hear, when Cap's like, "Hey, Queens."
Yeah, that was
think
cute.
fast,
that
right?
Was cute.
Right, and that was awesome. But yeah, Cap with the hammer was amazing.
Okay, so let's talk
and
about that.
Thor and his mom.
That was really sweet. So I totally forgot that Rene Russo was even in these movies. And Nick and I were talking about this in the car. Why is it that Cap can now wield the hammer? Is it because he has proven himself to be pure of heart and worthy of it?
He always was.
Oh.
Because there's that scene in Age of Ultron
Right.
where
they're at the party.
where they're at the party and
Tony tries to pick it up and can't.
right, nobody can pick it up, and Steve moves it, right?
Oh, okay.
And you could argue that like Steve is a good enough guy that he's not going to embarrass Thor, and he's going to
Sure.
kind of do the like wink to Thor and be like,
Oh, too heavy for me.
Like, oh, but it's too heavy. Like,
And that's why Thor says, "Oh, I knew you could do it."
Yeah.
right,
That's
right.
cute.
And so if there's any, and look, the comics have played with letting people pick up the hammer from time to time. In fact, the most recent run of, or not most recent, but a couple, like within the last year and a half, Jane Foster was wielding the hammer. Like she was Lady Thor. She'd picked up the hammer and she was Thor for a while. So it's, whoever's worthy, but it totally fits within the way Cap's been written that he would absolutely be worthy. And, I would, again, he would be enough of I could see it would be within the personality that character's been written that he's not going to embarrass Thor in front of everybody.
Sure.
Right? Like,
What is fun about the time travel here is that it allows everybody to sort of loop-de-loop their way through a bunch of the previous films. So like suddenly we're at the end of the Avengers and like they're watching themselves like save New York again, and we get the cap battle,
that was fun.
That reminded me of Moon. And of the Will Smith movie we're going to talk about the trailer for.
Right, but
And Jackie Chan's Twin Dragons.
But that was a really fun one when older Cap says, I could do this all day. And the newer one's like, yeah, I know. Right? Like, that was really fun. The elevator scene was great. That was a great
fun
callback to Winter Soldier, where it's like, I expected to be like, before we get started. Right? Because that's one of the better scenes in that movie. But when he just kind of leans forward, it's like, hey, Elijah. There was look, like, there's a lot of great stuff, and I guess my complaints are frustrating because, again, like, I feel like some of the character work, like, to me, the really fascinating thing is that bitter argument between Tony and Steve at the top of the movie, right? That, I want 2 or 3 hours of that. Like, that's the character work. That's the real drama.
We get a lot of that, and we get a lot less action, I would say. I think we do have a lot, and everyone gets a chance to shine. Do you not think it's enough?
I don't think it's enough.
Right.
Like, but maybe it's that, it might be that I don't want to say goodbye to these characters, right? Like,
well, you're not going to have to, I bet.
No, I know, but like with, especially with Scarlett Johansson and her portrayal of Black Widow. I keep wanting to say Scarlet Widow, but with Black Widow, she's I think as an actress she struggled to bring in a couple of cases more to that character than what may have been on the page. But you really start in Winter Soldier. I think you start to really see some interesting humanity from Black Widow that you hadn't previously seen in the movies. The stuff where she's on the run with Rogers, and I liked that a lot. And I kind of wanted to see more of that. Like, and look, like if we're getting a prequel, great, right? But I just feel like, boy, of all of them, she's the one who got short
shrift. As long as
shrift.
it's not like Red Sparrow,
right?
Or she goes to horror school.
Right, but again, like
it has to happen, right?
Of the original players, right? Yes. The 5 or 6 original ones, she's the one that I think gets short shrift. But
no, I agree. Even in getting an action figure or whatever, I was impressed that they got Tilda back, we got Robert Redford back, and then we got Michael Douglas back. Although it was pointed out to me that Redford and Michael Douglas might have been entirely CG'd.
Well, he looks like Streets of San Francisco, Michael Douglas.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's already been de-aged anyway,
right,
so they may have just fully animated like this young Michael Douglas
right.
and had him loop the line or something.
That's true.
The fun game would be like I kind of want to go back through it and start running a tally in my head, like how many days did they have this particular?
Well, yeah,
right? Like
they how many hours?
Like one day for
Tony Stark's funeral. It's like here's the Ant-Man group,
right,
and here's the Spider-Man, and it's so obviously like we're not there
right.
at the same
it's
day.
Very awkward,
Sam Jackson, can we just get you for a day? That's all we need. Just one day.
You just have to walk out
1
of
hour.
Right.
I enjoyed Tony Stark seeing his dad on the day of his own birth.
Oh, that was
that
nice.
was kind of a cool bit, and seeing where his perspective has now changed because he's a dad himself, and maybe he's a little less cocky than he was.
Yeah, that scene, and then the Thor and his mom scene, those are both really moving. And then that's when it's in that moment of the film when we get to meanwhile at the Red Skull Cliffs, it's
right.
Hawkeye and Black Widow, and I was kind of like, oh God! Like that's for a moment. Like I had a moment of like, Christ, this movie's getting long. But then their scene also wound up having an emotional payoff. So it was a fleeting moment, but when that scene started, just pacing wise, I was like, oh Jesus, how many teams are there here?
But I would say I did not feel overwhelmed like I have in a lot of these big ensemble movies. Like the Avengers movies are my least favorite of all of the Marvel movies because they seem so unwieldy, and it seems like everyone is just getting jammed in. And this, to me, did a better job of giving everybody his or her moment, tying up all the loose ends in a way that like actually, Civil War feels the most jammed to me. Civil War feels the most confusing in that, like, I couldn't keep track of who was on whose team, and like after a little while, just didn't even care. I guess it helps this time that they're all on the same team.
I mean, it's the first Avengers is actually my favorite of these movies, and I think it's because I like, as much as these people are entertaining in their own movies, it's fun to watch them bump up against each other.
Well, there's only 6 of them in the first one.
Exactly, and so it's much more manageable. And even in Infinity War, while that movie has its problems, it is fun that you're suddenly like, oh look, Rocket Raccoon is in Wakanda. Like, they'll just moosh together all the stuff that they've been giving us up till now.
And look, there's a lot of really great moments, like the moment where Nat's running the show and she's kind of like, hey, and Okoye's like, oh yeah, we had this underwater earthquake, and she's like, well, what are you doing about it? And Okoye's like, nothing. It's an earthquake. We're letting it happen. Right? Like, I liked that. So there are a lot of really great moments. Again, it's just like the holes in the logic really bother me, and the short, and again, like maybe it's that I wanted another hour or two, right?
But maybe it makes up for the lack of
let it go, man.
the lack of logical cohesion with like a lot of really powerful emotion, like even the absolute ending of like Cap giving the shield to Falcon. That was like a literal passing of the baton.
Yeah.
That was a lovely moment for a lot of reasons.
No, right, and
it has a lot of those moments.
Right, and I love the moment where that was. I actually had expected them to turn around and like see something carved on a tree.
Me
right?
too.
Like I kept expecting to see like a heart that said like SR plus PC, right? Peggy Carter, like that they got together or something. And so to see him show up that old, and I love the way they played it. It's like, you want to tell me about it? And he's like, no, I don't think so. Like that was great. You got the ring on his finger. You do kind of feel like, what year did he go back? Did he bust up the marriage that she had when she ended up married to some other guy?
No, I think she went back to like 1945, like before he wound up in the ice or something.
Maybe.
That's baffling because, again, like I said, he rewrites the entire history of the 20th century as far as these movies are concerned.
But it's nice.
The other thing is he knows everything that's coming.
That's true,
right?
And he still chose that jacket.
And there's always there were little things along the way that kind of bugged me, like when they go to 2012 and they don't have enough Pym particles, so they have to go to 1970 to get the thing. Right. And I was thinking, wait, in 2012, just go find Pym. He'll make you some more.
But how do you explain that to him?
You explain it to Hank Pym.
Actually, my thought when he picks up all those Pym particles, I'm like, come on, man, those are leaded. Everybody runs on unleaded now. You don't know that those are going to work. Come on.
They've got cyclamates in them.
Exactly.
Anyway.
Red line number 2.
Exactly. Those have asbestos. And lead paint.
Don't lick them, no. It was. I enjoyed it, but I'm okay with saying goodbye to all these folks. And the movies I always liked the best were like, Doctor Strange and Ragnarok and the first Guardians. Like I always like those better, so I'm okay with saying goodbye to the ensemble.
I find this movie satisfying. It is in a slight way. It doesn't mean anything, but in terms of somebody who's been watching all these movies, I feel like it checked the boxes that I wanted it to check, and now we can move on to whatever happens next.
Right, you do get the good. I do think it was. You definitely get the goodbye of the people that you're pretty sure aren't coming back, right? And the signatures at the end were a nice touch.
That was a lovely thing. Yeah.
Although that made me think of Star Trek: The Undiscovered Country, because they did that. They did that too.
I did not think of that, but I thought it was a nice touch. And everyone in my theater stayed for the whole credits, only to find that there was nothing at the absolute end.
At the premiere, they ended the credits after the signature part. And I was like, well, I guess there's no shawarma on this one.
Oh no, we all sat around there for like 15 more minutes and waited and waited.
Or is there?
Or is there? Oh, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean?
Because you get the Marvel logo, but you hear something.
Oh, you hear like a ding, like a metal.
You hear like
a ding,
clanking, like somebody working on, like somebody
forging a new suit.
Somebody forging a metal suit.
Okay, we'll find out.
Well, we still got War Machine and Pepper, so
That's true. Anyway.
Yeah, so that was an interesting one too. Was the appearance? Okay, minor point, that helmet he was working on was blue, and she shows up and she's all silver or gold and silver. So,
I don't remember.
Anyway, that's the rescue
Are
suit.
these movies now going to pick up in 2024?
Blah.
Or 2023 or whatever?
We can jump around
That's
to whatever
actually
year.
only like 2 or 3 years from now, so maybe.
True, yeah.
Right, well, actually, think about it. So if we have a Spider-Man movie coming. Doesn't really matter what year the next Guardians is because they're out in space, so none of that matters. Captain Marvel could be another prequel, or she could be out in space.
True.
And if
Black Panther.
Black Widow,
if that's coming, that will be a prequel.
Probably. But there's a Black Panther movie also.
Black Panther could be. Yeah.
The other time travel thing that bugged me, this is dumb, but when Peter Parker returns to high school, his best friend is still the same age.
Right, because he was also disappeared.
Oh.
Yeah.
Never mind.
No, but you got to figure, like, what's the aftermath of that? Like, half that school, like,
He's suddenly 5 years older.
and then half of them come back, like, that's...
Our 9th grade is really packed this year.
Yeah, right? Like, what's it like going to Disney?
Graduated.
Like, I kept thinking, like, man, half the population's gone. That makes that new Disneyland, Star Wars land awesome, right? Like,
No
well,
lines.
no, there's no lines. Going to the DMV's a snap.
No
As
pun
it were.
intended. Man, all right. Well, thank you for
Anyway.
listening to our little spoiler section, and let us know what you thought of it, too.
Enjoy. Thanks for watching. Like this video. Subscribe to our channel here on YouTube. Follow us at BeFastAllDay on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And check us out at patreon.com/BeFastAllDay, where we offer TV recaps and trailer reviews and other exclusive stuff for our Patreon members. Thanks.
Bye.